So ending your diet is the thing that's talked about the least, but in my opinion is the most important part of any kind of weight loss plan, because if you've ever gone through the process, you know how difficult it can be once the diet's done to shift focus, go on to something new, keep the weight off. There's a lot of things fighting you. That being said, I'm not here to waste anybody's time. So if you don't care about any of the reasons why this happens, both physiologically, psychologically, and everything I think you should know, I'm gonna put a timestamp here you can skip to get to that, but I'm telling you, I don't recommend that. I personally think it's super important to know the why behind these things so you can understand and set yourself up for success. But the biggest thing I want you to know is you aren't alone with these struggles. In fact, almost everybody struggles with it. It's just almost nobody talks about it because we don't want to talk about our struggles. Social media very much is a highlight reel. You see tons of people lose weight, often very fast, but when they stop and they gain the weight back, you don't see them talking about this, so you feel like something's wrong with you. I promise, there's nothing wrong with you when you struggle after a diet, and honestly, it should be expected. One of the big things I talk about with clients whenever they're done with the cutting phase is, okay, the hardest part is now coming up. This is when your body's gonna fight you, when you're gonna be struggling mentally, when your hormones are all out of whack, and you're gonna be super hungry, and your body's gonna be doing everything it can to get you to gain the weight back. This is gonna be a struggle. Be prepared. And even with those conversations, a lot of times they'll come back and say, I really thought this was gonna be the easiest part, but it's actually been really hard. It's just, we feel like, okay, we're gonna get more food now, the cutting's over with, now I'm gonna be less hungry and everything's gonna be great. Just doesn't usually work that way. You may have heard these statistics before. People like Layne Norton talk about them a lot. A lot of it's coming from this research paper that goes through why it's so hard to keep the weight off and it's so easy to regain weight post-diet. And when you start digging through some of the research in here, it's pretty staggering, some of the numbers. And it's actually not uncommon to lose weight. In fact, it's like 85% of obese people lose at least 10% of their weight at some point in life. Unfortunately, within a year, around maybe 70-75% of people end up gaining the weight back. And then when you get to about 3+ years, it's like 90-95% of people who lose weight gain it back, and a large percentage of those people gain even more. Personally, I think there's a lot of reasons for this. One of the bigger ones is most people don't have any kind of plan for whenever they're done dieting. It's just, I'm gonna do this. Once the diet's done, then I'm gonna go back to what I was doing before and I'm just done. And we both know how that ends. You need to be doing something that you can continue to do. That's why we call it a lifestyle if you wanna keep the weight off. And the thing is, there's no one set way of doing this stuff. I mean, there's literally thousands of different ways that you can lose weight, and it's not eat this, don't eat that. There's no such thing as good versus bad foods. I'm not gonna get into that this video. I'll put a link in the description of a video where I talk about this, but it's not a one quick fix. It's not insert hack here. It's about making it a sustainable lifestyle, something that you're gonna keep doing. Now, people will hear sustainability, and I think sometimes they feel like, well, that just means that I shouldn't ever have to do anything that I don't wanna do, and that's definitely not the case. Trust me, it's not gonna be easy. You're gonna have to put in work, and there's gonna be things that you don't want to do that you're gonna have to do. But we also want to make it as little restrictive as possible so that we're not just relying on willpower and doing things that we hate. Because if you do something you hate, there's almost zero chance you're gonna keep doing it for the rest of your life. So yeah, whatever you're gonna do to lose weight, make sure that's something you can keep doing. Now, that doesn't mean that you're gonna be on low calories forever, have to pound yourself into the ground all the time. Absolutely not. And you can and should, once you're done, get your calories up. I'll talk about this in a little bit. And you can even back off the exercise and not do as much, because maintaining doesn't take as much as losing, but you're certainly gonna have to continue to live a healthy lifestyle. So anyways, why is it such a struggle? And again, I wanna reiterate this because I think it's really important. This is a common struggle. When I say common, I mean almost everybody. I would even go as far as to say probably 80-90% of people stop a cut and then switch phases and start to struggle. It is a challenge, and there's both physiological and psychological reasons for this. Again, nobody's talking about this, and it drives me nuts because we're just setting people up to fail if we don't. You need to know that this is normal and be prepared for it so you can take some actionable steps and not feel like something's wrong with you. Starting with the physiological reasons as to why it's such a struggle, and it's just your body has this natural body fat set point. You lose a bunch of weight, you're below that body fat set point, your body wants you to get back to where it used to be. This is this way of kind of fighting against starvation. It wants to make sure you have enough energy reserved, so if your body goes through times of low calories, you won't starve to death. So while this is great for staying alive, this is not so great for losing weight and keeping it off, and why it's so dang easy to gain the weight back so much faster than it was to lose it. Many of these changes are hormonal, some of them being hunger hormones like ghrelin, which tells your body when you're hungry. This goes up. You have leptin that reduces when you lose body fat. This is something that signals to your body when you're full, so when you do eat, you never feel like you're full. You have things that change like your thyroid and your testosterone, and basically everything in the body gets all out of whack, and these are all ways for your body to signal to you it's time to eat more and gain some weight back. And on top of these hormonal changes, which are gonna make you more tired, more irritable, your motivation is gonna drop, you're just gonna feel exhausted, you also have the metabolic adaptations that occur as well, which basically means that your body's metabolism is gonna slow down, not only because you now weigh less and have less energy demand, but also there's research that suggests you actually see greater slowdowns in metabolism than would be predicted just by weight loss alone. So now your body's adapted to these lower calories, the higher activity levels, so it takes a lot less calories to maintain your weight because of these metabolic suppressions. And then when you combine the metabolic adaptations with the hormonal adaptations, it makes it so easy to overeat and gain weight rapidly. And on top of that, it might even be possible that if you gain weight in a rapid approach, you could even create new fat cells. And when you create new fat cells, they're never going away. You can have more or less fat inside those fat cells, but you're not getting rid of them. And that just makes it harder and harder to lose weight down the road. And the more you diet, the more aggressively you diet, the longer you do this, the more these adaptations occur. And it just gets more and more hard each time. I mean, tell me if you haven't gone through multiple cycles of dieting that it hasn't gotten more and more difficult each time. This is why. So with this, you need to give yourself some grace, and you need to understand there's nothing wrong with you. When your motivation drops and you don't feel like doing anything and you're super tired and you just want to eat everything and you don't care in the moment if you gain more weight, which of course eventually you do, but in the moment it's just like, F it, I don't care, I'm too tired, I'm too hungry, I can't take it. This is its body doing its job. So don't beat yourself up, don't judge yourself harshly. This is normal. However, now that you know this, you also need to be prepared for it and be willing to fight back if you do want to keep this pattern from reoccurring. So the other part to this is not just what happens physiologically, it's also the mental side of things, which don't get me wrong, the hormone changes do factor in to the mental struggles you have. This is very much normal, but it's not even just that. It's also we're just motivated by progress. We love to make progress. And when you're losing body fat and you're seeing your body change before your eyes, you can deal with some of the more negative things like being hungrier and tired and everything else because you're doing it to reach that goal. Now, once you've met that goal, or even if you haven't met it, but you're just kind of over the dieting and want to be done, well, now you're switching phases here and you don't have that carrot dangling in front of you to help with the motivation side of things. And it can be really difficult to stay on top of things when you know you're not going to be seeing progress. It kind of feels like, well, what am I working towards? Why am I working so hard to just stay the same? That's not a very motivating goal, staying the same, even though that's the thing that most people say they want. They say, I want to lose the weight and I just want to keep it off, and that's my goal. But when we get to the keeping it off part, can you continue to do everything that's necessary to keep those results without seeing change? Not an easy thing to do, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but usually we need to start focusing our attention on other areas, much like performance-based goals and things that aren't body fat or body composition related that will help keep you more active and not falling into the all or nothing mentality. Okay, so now you know why it's so dang hard to stop a diet, stay focused, and not gain the weight back. So what steps can we take to help give ourselves a better chance of success? Well, first, it starts with having a plan. I said it right in the beginning of the video. You need to have some sort of plan. Don't just think about some mad dash to the finish line and just being done when you're done. It doesn't work that way. You need to start figuring out what you're gonna do when the diet's done before you even get there. Are you gonna reverse diet out more gradually so that your metabolism can adapt back up while minimizing changes in body fat? Or are you gonna be better off bringing calories up faster so that you can feel better and enjoy more food and things like that? Always remember the delicate balance between a slower and faster approach. The faster you increase calories, the more likely you are to gain weight, but the faster you're gonna feel better. The slower you bring calories up, the longer it's gonna take to feel better, but the more you're gonna be able to get all the benefits that come with bringing up your calories, like feeling better, being less hungry, having less fatigue, recovering better, performing better, etc. Keep in mind too, even if you would prefer to take a slower approach, if you can't realistically stick to it anymore because you're just completely over it, you may do better jumping up your calories faster, even though in theory you would more likely gain a little bit more. But understand, if you're actually hitting calories versus continuously overeating and blowing it out because it doesn't feel realistic, you'll actually gain less by taking a faster approach by actually adhering versus binging and then trying to restrict and just making it a nightmare. Having some form of accountability is really helpful, whether that's just making sure you're continuing to track, or if you haven't been tracking, then starting to track until you get yourself into a better place. The last thing you want to do if you've been tracking is just to try to start eating intuitively right away after a diet, because your intuition is going to be to eat everything in sight. You want to wait until you're in a better spot hormonally, metabolically, mentally, everything before making that approach. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about at the end of this video how to transition into more of an intuitive eating approach, but you want to keep yourself accountable. Or having a coach, even if you didn't have one through your cut, having someone who can help you reverse back out, someone who can be objective with you, someone who's not in your own head, because we all have a hard time being objective with ourselves, that can make sure you stay on plan better and get out to a spot where you can be, again, more intuitive. Keep reminding yourself that food will always be there. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be here forever. And sometimes we feel like, well, I just have to get it all in right now, especially when you've been dieting, especially if you did it in an overly restrictive way. Now all these things that were off limits or you couldn't enjoy very much, you want to have them again, and you want them all because of what's happened to you hormonally. So you have this urge to just eat as much as you can, and you feel like you're missing out if you don't. Remember, it's there. It's not going anywhere. So the time for more food will come, and if you keep yourself in a good spot, keep getting calories up over time, this is how you can get your calories nice and high, keep your weight much more stable, and eventually put yourself in a spot where you can enjoy a lot more of these good foods without constantly cycling up and down all the time. And what to continue to remind yourself as well is this is something that tends to escape us, even though it sounds simple and pretty logical, we don't always think this way, and that is just because you're hungry doesn't mean you have to eat. We oftentimes take this hunger signal as, well, my body's telling me that I have to eat, so therefore I should eat, or something horrible is gonna happen, but it's not. And in fact, most of the time, if you're hungry and you just don't eat, eventually it goes away by itself anyway. Or as I talked about in my previous video, at a minimum, just make sure the extra food you're eating is as high protein as possible to minimize the chances of extra body fat. And that's another strategy to take as well coming out of diet, is make sure you keep up with, or if you weren't doing it before, start eating a higher protein diet. It's just so helpful for reducing hunger, for minimizing chances of body fat gain, for keeping yourself in a good spot metabolically, helping with body composition. It's just so underrated how beneficial protein is. Now, another thing that you need to remind yourself, and this is a big one, you have to understand the difference between gaining a small amount of weight back to have more balance versus gaining all the weight back. Just because you gain 5 or 10 pounds back after losing 40 or 50 pounds doesn't make you a failure. And actually, you got to remember too that the first few pounds are easily contributed to things like water and glycogen and all these things that are not even body fat related. And even then, your lowest weight is rarely going to be sustainable at the end of a dieting phase. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from people who lost just crazy amounts of weight, even like 100, 150, even 200 pounds, and then they gain 10, 20 pounds back and they think there's some sort of giant failure, and what's the point? I might as well just quit because I've screwed everything up. It's like, you're literally down like 130 pounds from where you started after gaining 20 back. That's a huge success. That's not a failure. Stop putting so much pressure on being as low weight as possible all the time. There's a balance to this. It's not just be as lean as possible, and being super lean doesn't even feel that good. And lean is relative. I'm not even just talking about like X body fat percent, like when I got as lean as I could for a physique show. That's not even the same thing. It's just being lean for your personal body fat set point doesn't feel good. So being okay with gaining some weight back and having it more of a range of weight and not some magical number is a big part of helping be in a better spot mentally and keeping yourself from falling back into that all or nothing mindset. And also, when you make mistakes, yes, I'm emphasizing when, not if. It's gonna happen. You need to be okay with this and not beat yourself up. Stop judging yourself so harshly. It's just get back on track. You never want to look back as a way to like beat yourself up. That's not going to help. Doesn't mean you shouldn't look back. I think it can be valuable to look back and say, okay, what could I have done differently to put myself in a better position for success? How can I learn from this to do better moving forward? And this is just how we get better at almost anything in life, is through our failures. So we need to stop trying to avoid them all the time. They're the best teaching tools we have. The reason we're so afraid of them is because you judge yourself so harshly for it. So that's the first thing you got to stop, and just know that there's nothing you can do to screw everything up in a day or a weekend or a week or even multiple weeks. Just get back on track, and then also make sure you're being patient. Give your body time. It's not a fast thing, unfortunately, especially if you lose a lot of weight. It's gonna take time for your body to realize this is kind of the new body fat set point and adjust. Now, I mentioned switching to a more intuitive eating approach so you don't feel like you have to track all the time, and doing it in a way without gaining all the weight back. Well, this video is long enough, but I already have a video talking about this specifically. So if you wanna know more about this, check that out in the top video next. Otherwise, I think you'll like this bottom video instead. And I'll see you next time.